So you've done a spell that you wish you hadn't done. Maybe you've changed your mind. Maybe it's a binding spell and you no longer want to bind that person anymore. Or maybe it's a spell where you've bound something to you and you no longer want to be connected to that anymore. What can you do about it? You can undo this spell, you can cancel the spell, you can do an unbinding. There's a few different things you can do, provided the spell has not already come into manifestation. So we're going to talk about that in this video, but before we do, hi, I'm Sandra from mysterywitchschool.com. If you're new to the channel and you want to become a witch or a Wiccan, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss any videos. Today we're talking spell work, and it's mostly about spell work that you've already done that you're wanting to modify or change in some way. So there's spells called undoing spells or cancellation spells or unbinding spells, spell reversals, all these kinds of things that you can use to be able to work with magic that you've already done. So for example, a binding spell. You may have done a binding spell out of protection to stop somebody from harming you. You may have then learnt that maybe that wasn't the person, or maybe that situation isn't an issue anymore and you're wanting to unbind that person, for example. Then you can do an unbinding spell. Now, I've already got a video about releasing a bind, so that's whether the bind is for you or whether it's for someone else. You can still use that unbinding spell. I'll pop the link to that video in the description field below because I don't want to go repeating myself in this one. So there's unbinding. There may be a case where you've maybe done a magical working where it hasn't landed yet, meaning it hasn't manifested, and you've got second thoughts. Maybe you don't want what you cast for in the first place and you don't want it to happen. So you essentially want to cancel it or neutralize it. So there's a way that you can go about doing that. And an easy way to do that is to get yourself a black candle. You can either write down on a petition what it is you're wanting to neutralize. So you might mention the spell that you did, the name of the spell that you did, the date when you did it, and light the candle. You may want to dress it with sandalwood oil, olive oil, something that is very, very common spiritual type of oil. Frankincense, even myrrh. It doesn't necessarily have to be a banishing oil. Any one of those really spiritual oils like sandalwood, myrrh, frankincense, those kinds of oils are really good to dress your candles in when you're doing something to neutralize. And you can also use olive oil as well. There's two ways that you can work with your candle. One is to light the candle, let it burn down to maybe 3/4 of a way, burn your petition, and then break the candle in half and then discard the candle away from your premises. Another way that you can do it is to immerse your candle in some water. So this is where you might have a bowl or your cauldron or some kind of heat-proof bowl. Put your candle in the bowl, fill the bowl with water, enough so that there's about at least 1/2 to 3/4 of the candle over the water, on top of the water. Light your candle, and then as the candle burns down and gets to where the water is, the water will snuff the candle out. And so your spell, what you're cancelling, what you're neutralising, will get snuffed out with it. They're general banishing spells anyway. You can use those really quick little candle spells to banish anything negative. You can just pour all that negative energy into the candle, allow the black to absorb that energy, and then let it burn down, either snap it in half or let it burn down in a bowl of water, and the water will then neutralize the energy. So that's a quick way that you can neutralize a spell. You can't undo a spell once it's already landed, so once it's already manifested. That would mean then if you weren't happy with the results, you may then need to do some other magic to then kind of fix it, if it's something that needs to be fixed. Otherwise, you just have to learn from what you've done and know how to do things differently the next time. So before casting a spell, it's really important to know right from the get-go, number one, what you really want from the spell. If you're really clear about what you're wanting, it's unlikely that you're going to need to cancel it out before it's landed or feel regret once it has landed. Number two, never do a spell when you're in a negative frame of mind. If you're in a state of fear, if you're in a state of anger, resentment, or any of those emotions that are more on the negative side, don't do any magic, because you may be sending the wrong kind of energy out there into the universe. So the results may not be exactly what you want. It may not land the way you want it to land. The circumstances may not be as favorable as they could have been if you had been in a more peaceful, harmonious or joyous state of mind when you were doing the spell casting. Any regrets that you might have as well if you're doing spells out of anger or resentment, particularly if you're aiming that at another person, then you may find yourself regretting that further down the track. So always make sure that you are taking time out when you know that you've got a lot of emotion going on. It's not a positive emotion. It's negative. It's anger, resentment, fear, that kind of thing. Don't do spell casting when you're in that state, because often the results won't necessarily be as good as you want them to be, or they just might turn out to be more about bringing in what you're afraid of as opposed to what it is you really want. Or you may end up causing harm when really at the end of the day you will regret it afterwards. So think about those things. Another thing about spell casting too is the wording of the spell. Be clear in your wording, because the universe has a tendency to take things literally. And I know that this happens a lot. For an example, I do have a friend who just said one day, didn't even do a spell, I need a break, because things were just getting too much for her. Just too much responsibility, too many people wanting, a piece of her, so to speak. And she just said, I need a break. And she said that out loud to the universe, I need a break. I want a break. The next day, she had a car accident, severely broke her leg. She was out of action for like 9 months in recovery and still has pain to this day. So be careful what you say. If you use things like break just to mean basically you want a holiday or you want to change, be specific about what it is you're really wanting, because that's likely what you're going to get. So always make sure your wording is spot on with what you're wanting and can't be misconstrued for anything else. Really important that your wording is there. Now with magic, we normally say all your spell materials that you've been using, like any remains from your candles or ash or anything that you discard. If you don't discard them, if you do keep them for maybe a small length of time, you can actually use these remains to help you in a spell cancellation or a spell reversal. So in that case, if you do have any remains of a spell and you are wanting to neutralize it before it's landed or before it's manifested, then you can use those spell materials in a cancellation spell to then directly link it to the spell that you did initially. And you can work with that by either pouring some of the black candle wax over the remains, and then once you've either broken the candle or it's extinguished in the water, you can then discard all of those remains, everything together, away from your premises. And that's how you can work with remains from a spell. But I know most of you, or if you're like me, I usually get rid of my spell remains pretty quickly. I've never had to do a spell cancellation, so I haven't the experience to say whether it works or not, because I've never done it. I just know that it's an option if you do find yourself wanting to do it for whatever reason. And there are times when often you'll think you want something and then you'll realize that you don't really want it. Maybe you only thought you wanted it, or maybe you thought you should have it, those kinds of things. You shouldn't need to use reversal spells, or in this case, spell reversal spells. I'm not talking about reversal spells as in curse reversal spells. Undoing spells or any of these things very often. It's probably rare that you would use them. It's more likely that you would do something like an unbinding spell. So you might bind yourself to maybe a job or something. And then it's time for you then to want to unbind yourself from a job because you've either got options elsewhere or you're wanting to do something else. So you can use an unbinding spell then to unbind. So if you've got yourself bound to a job and you've got your symbol of your binding kept away somewhere in a spell box or something, the ceremony that you would do would be simply the ceremony around cutting the bind or cutting the cord. Or if you've done a binding bag, to undo the bag and then let all of the remains out somewhere. So you may want to discard them again away from your premises. So there's simple ways to do unbinding. Or, like I said, I do have an unbinding spell on YouTube, and the link will be in the description field below the video. So spell casting is something that you do need to really think about before you go ahead and do it. It's something that it's good to have a bit of a strategy going in to know being realistic about magic and not treating magic like it's seen in the movies where you just mutter some words and bang, stuff happens. And although that does often happen, it isn't necessarily the way it always happens. Most of the time you've got to do a number of things and you've got to be doing magic for something that really is within your sphere of availability and work step by step to bring in the things that you want to bring in along the way. And if you want to know how to do that, download my free PDF. It's the Spellcaster Checklist, and it has quite a few steps that you can take to really get more clear about what it is you're really wanting to do with your spell crafting, so that you're aiming for things that are realistic and you are developing good magical habits along the way of your witchcraft work. If you like the video, hit the like button, share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm Sandra from mysterywitchschool.com. Blessed be.